The NFL season brings hope and hype for fans, but as the games unfold, reality often hits hard.
Long overdue. I never thought he deserved to be the head coach anyway because of, his initial tenure in Oakland. The man has had one winning season in 6 years as a head coach, and that was a 9-8 record.
Some teams exceed expectations, but others, well, their struggles seemed inevitable from the start.
This team is a dumpster fire. Yeah. The organization as a whole. Sure. Man, we're trading for Mingo at the trading deadline.
Bingo, what's his name?
To try to salvage this
like
season. This was trending in a bad direction for Jerry and Stephen Jones. And I don't think anybody expected it to go this fast.
These three teams that we're going to go over today have stumbled through the 2024 season in ways that were honestly just all too predictable. And after days of research, I've uncovered the three biggest dumpster fires in the league, and I'm going to reveal why they are still burning bright. Are you looking for a new book this football season? BetUS is the answer. They have the fastest and easiest payouts in the industry, along with 24/7 personalized service 365 days a year. Not only that, but they have live wagering on all major games, so if you see something mid-game and want to make a wager on it, you can. And the best part is you get 10% back on your net losses twice a year. And now look, you guys knew I had to come through with you guys for a promo code, so make sure that you guys are using code YouTube150 for a nice 150% deposit bonus on up to $2,000. That's right, we were doing 125%, but we said screw that, we're giving you guys 150% instead. Again, that is promo code YouTube150 for a 150% deposit bonus on up to $2,000. Again, thank you to BetUS for sponsoring today's video, but for now, let's hop back into it. First up, we're going to look at the New Orleans Saints, a team that has been perfectly mediocre ever since my GOAT, Drew Brees, did retire and downright has been depressing this year. I mean, hell, as a fellow Saints fans for myself, and I'm sure I speak for a lot of the fans out there, can we just go back to the first 2 weeks of the season where we thought we were going to win the Super Bowl? Like, man, that was awesome. It started out so well with the team winning their first 2 games and landing a total of 91 points on the Carolina Panthers and Dallas Cowboys, with people like myself lauding the improved offensive line and the arrival of Clint Kubiak as the offensive coordinator. But then inevitably, the Saints began to absolutely suck ass. The offensive line came back to earth, Derek Carr threw interceptions in 4 straight games, and the defense started to fall apart. And before we even go to the justifiable criticisms of this team that I love so much and so dearly, even though it's really hard to support them right now, it is worth noting honestly how hard this team has been hit by injuries this year. With Carr missing a few games, Rashid Shaheed being ruled out for the entire season, and Chris Olave now missing multiple games with multiple concussions, and honestly having the same amount of concussions, or at least track record, that Tua Tagovailoa has had, it just is completely confusing on why they haven't made this guy retire as well. But not only that, the defense has been hit hard as well, with Paulson Adebo breaking his femur and Marshawn Lattimore and Kool-Aid McKinstry both missing games in the secondary. And don't worry, we're going to talk about the whole Lattimore thing because that trade is just, I'm going to miss my GOAT, but again, we'll get back to that. And like I said too, it's been rough to be a Saints fan or just even on that Saints team this year. And really, you can't even use the injury bug or the injury excuse for them because all teams face injuries that they have to just deal with every single season. But the Saints have folded like none other. After leading the league in scoring in the first 2 games, the team has declined to average just 17 points over their last 7 games, which were all losses, producing a 2-7 record. Defensively, the Saints are giving up 376.4 yards per game, which is the 5th worst in the NFL, and 6 yards per play, which is the 2nd worst in the NFL. They cannot stop the run or the pass, ranking inside the bottom 7 in both categories from a yards per game perspective. And this offense is nowhere near good enough to make up for all of that. Honestly, as a result, they have looked like the worst team in football this year. So now the question is, well, how do they fix it? And well, I'm afraid there aren't any answers to that as well. As things stand, the Saints are due to be $61.5 million over the cap in 2025. And yes, I know this graphic does show $81.5 million, but that is because of some other things. And don't worry, they're not unfamiliar with this territory, as they put a whole new meaning to the phrase kick the can down the road, which they've just progressively done with contracts like Kamara's, Taysom Hill's, which I don't even know why they still have him, but well, that's a whole other thing again. But yeah, again, just ignore that. It's going to be $61.5 million over the cap by the end of the season. To be frank, they pretty much need help at every single spot again, the Saints they need to just nuke everything. They need to go into complete rebuild mode. They have to start changing everything. And if they don't, then they're going to stay in that like weird 7 to like 12 pick range that they've always been in, or I guess 7 to like 16 is what they're normally in. And you're just not going to get the type of player that they need to just be the franchise player to change this team. And again, by balancing the books, by getting rid of some of those older players, that does sound like the most sensible path. But by doing that, you are clearly opening up yourself to a full tear it down rebuild, which I think they do have to do, and either handing the team over to Spencer Rattler, or if they can land a top 3 pick, selecting a rookie quarterback. And I mean, yes, we have just seen how unreliable rookie quarterbacks have been over the recent years, but if they can at least let him learn from somebody like Carr, then maybe they will be okay. And now, yes, I do know that the class that is coming up this year, there really aren't any like great signal callers, especially after the past 2 classes we just had with like CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams, Bryce Young, all those guys. I guess I shouldn't even call Caleb Williams and Bryce Young like superstar potential. Just, you know what I'm trying to say, that the past 2 draft classes have been pretty phenomenal for quarterbacks. And then this upcoming one, we have like Shedeur Sanders. I can't think of anybody else besides Shedeur Sanders. I mean, obviously you guys in the comments let me know, but it just seems like the talent at the quarterback position compared to this year to the past 2 years is nowhere near it. But let me know in the comment section what you guys think. Either way though, it's just going to be very, very tough for them to find that just savior that the Saints do need to try to get this team back on track. And again, even if there was a superstar quarterback at the top of the 2025 draft, is this team really even equipped to try and nurture that rookie along and make him successful? And I'd probably argue no, especially with all the development struggles we have seen in recent years at the quarterback position in the NFL. We've seen how damaging bad situations have been for quarterbacks like Bryce Young and Justin Fields in recent years. And going back further, the same could be said for Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold, who are now thriving on new teams. The 2025 campaign might just need to be a year where New Orleans sucks it up, lives with the pain, and tries to lay the foundations for a quarterback to arrive in 2026 or potentially even 2027. But again, these are the consequences of mismanaging the cap. Unfortunately as well, these Saints have also mismanaged the draft. Like, I mean, if you're going to go top heavy with all of your contracts, which the Saints have done with like Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, and some other guys on the team too, then you need to bring in exciting young rookies that are going to have much cheaper contracts and balance the books that way, which the Saints have not been able to do for the past 3 to 4 years. Like, I think it was the draft class with Michael Thomas, Trey Hendrickson, Marshawn Lattimore. Like, that rookie class for the Saints was generational. Like, they brought in if you drafted like that every single year, they would win a Super Bowl in the next 2 or 3 years, but they haven't had that type of draft since that year. Like, as crazy as this sounds, they have drafted 7 players in each of the last 2 drafts, 5 in 2022, 6 players in 2021, and just 4 in 2020. In contrast, the Green Bay Packers have drafted 24 over the last 2 drafts alone. And we already know that the hit rate on rookies is low, so limiting your opportunities is risky. And right on cue, in a year that the Saints need to rebuild, they have just 6 picks in the upcoming draft of 2025 before the Marshawn Lattimore trade, so it did go up to 9 now. And the craziest part is I didn't even mention Dennis Allen, who before he got fired this week, which honestly I had to kind of revise this video because of it, that dude is terrible. He should have never been a head coach from the start. Like, I don't know why the Saints organization made him the head coach. He is a horrible coach that thinks kicking field goals win games. And before I lose my temper, I'm so happy he got fired. He should have been fired last year, but let's just keep moving on because that dude sucks as a coach. Like, I mean, the dude got fired with the same quarterback that was on the Raiders as the Saints, and he sucks. Overall though, this team has very little young talent to be excited about, very little depth, and a daunting list of expensive aging talent. Next up, the New York Football Giants, as this team just enjoyed 1 winning season since 2016. And I mean, in fairness, that was Dable's first season, which he did lead them to the divisional round of the playoffs, beating, I think it was the Vikings in the playoffs that year. Again, don't quote me, I think I might be wrong on that, but nonetheless, I mean, that was his first year, and that's when they had Saquon and all those guys, and they actually looked pretty good. But I mean, other than that, it's been pretty rough sledding for them. I mean, obviously we have to start with the pretty much main focus of the New York Giants, Daniel Jones. In an era where quarterback leashes seem to have been as short as ever, Jones started 67 regular season games, which have produced a 24, 42, and 1 record, and he has only posted a quarterback rating above 56 in 1 season. The 4-year, $160 million deal awarded him prior to the 2023 season did raise some eyebrows, and I think it's fair to say has gone exactly as expected since then. Jones has flashed good plays every now and then, even though it really hasn't, but he has remained a player who is underwhelmed and comes up small in the biggest moments. I mean, a great example of this is just last week's game-losing interception that he did have against the Steelers. The Giants actually had a chance at a comeback, only for Jones to float the ball over a wide wide open receiver indirectly to not one, but two Steelers defenders, and the game was completely over. Jones then actually had a nice game against the Commanders this week, but it came after a first half in which it was clear that Brian Daboll was trying to hide his starting quarterback. He ran the ball relentlessly to keep the ball out of Jones's hands, which tells you exactly what his own coaching staff does think of him. On the season, Jones has 1,880 passing yards, 8 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions to go along with 239 yards and one more score on the ground. All of that has equated to 15.4 points per game, which is only good enough for dead last in the NFL. And don't get me wrong, there are worse quarterbacks than Jones in the NFL. Like, there are plenty of them. But I mean, we are surely beyond the point of just trying to admit that you can even try to win games with Daniel Jones as your starting quarterback. And I think honestly, just with that lack of trust that the coaching staff does have with him, his time in New York is surely coming to an end. I mean, especially when you think of all the young and up and coming stars like Malik Neighbors and Tyron Tracy are only going to get frustrated by his presence in the lineup and perhaps have their development completely stunted. Thankfully, the Giants can get out of his contract at the end of the season and save some cap space, opening the door to the next era of this struggling franchise. Brian Daboll has showed himself to be a good coach at times, but he is also responsible for some embarrassing blunders this year, most notably not calling up a backup kicker when Graham Gano was injured prior to their Week 2 clash with Washington. The Giants instead decided to risk it. Gano got injured, and they were unable to convert any of their 3 touchdowns or score any field goals, and they lost by just 3. On the season, Daboll's Giants have a 2-7 record and once again have no hope. This particular dumpster fire is officially just counting down the days to the offseason when they can start looking towards the future with a new quarterback and potentially, and I honestly think he might get fired because of it sadly, but even a new head coach. As things stand right now, the Giants do possess the first overall pick in the NFL draft, and there are plenty of other quarterback hungry teams that do get ahead of them and not as many prospects to be excited about this time around. There is no guarantee that there is a solution near. And I mean, hell, even when you look at the division with the Commanders surging with Daniels and the Eagles apparently back on track, the Giants look set to be the whipping boys of the NFC East for a few years longer. Our final dumpster fire though, which has been a complete disappointment this year, is the Dallas Cowboys. As it does turn out, surprisingly, losing several reliable contributors and replacing them with well over the cliff veterans is not a savvy move, especially in a year where you claim to be all in Jerry Jones. And speaking of him, he is clearly a master at increasing the value of the Dallas Cowboys and changing his pocket, but his approach to building the Dallas Cowboys roster has been downright negligent. Jones proceeded to slow play the Dak Prescott and CD Lamb contracts, enjoying all of the media attention that came as a result, only to pay absolute top dollar at the very last moment, making Prescott the highest paid player in the NFL thanks to a $60 million per year deal, which is only $5 million more than the next group of quarterbacks with Joe Burrow, Jordan Love, and Trevor Lawrence, all getting $55 million per year. Jordan Love, Tua Tagovailoa, and Jared Goff were all signed to deals between $53 million and $55 million earlier in the offseason, and considering Prescott was willing to sign an extension as soon as the season ended, it certainly seems as if Jerry's slow playing approach cost his team around $5 million in cap space per year. And I mean, honestly, these are important when you have several studs that you need to pay, and with having Micah Parsons the next in line for a payday, an extra $5 million could have come in handy. To make matters even worse, also, they have gotten just horrible return on their investment on Dak this year. Like, they're sitting at a 3-5 record and have very little just reason to believe that they can even turn things around. Oh, but don't worry, they traded a 4th rounder for Jonathan Mingo. Like, what? Prescott has passed for 1,978 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions, currently averaging the worst quarterback rating of his career. He has admittedly not been helped by lack of offensive weapons, but surely that shouldn't be a problem for the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, right? Well, it has, and so far it is $60 million not well spent, and with so much money already tied up, the pressure is on to find playmakers to help Dak in the draft. Defensively, well, things are also in shambles. The injuries to Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence have not helped, but even before they departed, this unit was showing signs of steady weakness. They are conceding a whopping 28.1 points per game, which is second worst in the NFL, and are just as soft against the run as they were last year. Their 147.7 rushing yards conceded per game is the 3rd worst in the NFL, allowing teams to easily control the game. Not only can teams run on Dallas for fun to control the game, but the Dallas Cowboys are simply unable to establish any element of control themselves thanks to their own dismal 82 rushing yards per game on offense, which is second worst in the NFL. This puts heaps of pressure onto Dak Prescott, leading to the underwhelming results we have seen from him this year. And this is where we all come full circle and go back to Jerry Jones. It is just simply not acceptable to enter the season with Rico Dowell, Ezekiel Elliott, and Dalvin Cook as your main backs when you are meant to be competing. 2 years ago, the 49ers found a way to bring in CMC and almost won the Super Bowl. This year, Philadelphia has managed to snag Saquon and has instantly become contenders again as a result. And in Dallas, you have Jerry Jones telling reporters that they couldn't afford Derrick Henry after watching him scorch his own defense for 151 yards and 2 touchdowns in your own building. Oh, and just to note also, Dallas had 51 rushing yards in that game in comparison to 274 for Baltimore. I know which team I think has a chance in the postseason and which team doesn't. Jerry Jones has hamstrung his team, and the result is an all-in year in which the Cowboys look about as bad as they have since 2020. This team needs a rebuild with a new coaching staff and preferably a new owner who focuses on more of the on-field product than his own ego and the value of America's team. Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Micah Parsons, if they can sign him, give the Cowboys a foundation to build around. But do they have the cash and the savvy to actually build a competent roster? And if not, that $60 million a year to Dak is going to look like a bit silly, especially when you consider that Washington and Philly appear to be on the up and up in the NFC East. And if you want to see why the Washington Commanders deserve all of the success that they're having this year, from all of the struggles that they faced with Dan Snyder to their rebuild this year, then click this video right here.